see.
By the way, I did watch the documentary Splice. If you saw the episode planning,
nice.
I shotgunned it in an hour.
I did not. I spent time reading on the wiki though.
I mean, look, I was watching wrestling, and I decided I needed something else to do, and I decided to watch it too.
I don't know.
I was watching Uncle Roger videos, so.
Is he disappointed?
Oh, always. Hiya.
Yeah. Booyah.
I see you are also a man of taste.
Lunarsar, say something.
Something.
Let me. The big one. Okay, actually, let's get. So
all right, we all sound good.
All right, let's see how the video volume is.
It's still a little quieter, but I think I'm okay.
The gravity gun.
I guess at first, right? The gravity gun was kind of this. We weren't even sure we were going to ship it in the game.
The format here tonight's Splice?
We're just gonna talk about it, but I might be showing some clips from it as well. The issue is going to be scrubbing through it to find the exact moment.
I thought the format was MP4.
That is usually that. I'm actually going to show a little bit from something else to start, though.
You are in a cheeky mood today, Baggins.
I am. I'm full of homemade spaghetti sauce and spunk.
Just 1 second. I need to go to my Twitch page. Twitch.tv/Splice stream.
Splice, I have a question for you. It's a
Baggins, what are you full of?
I said homemade spaghetti sauce and spunk.
Okay.
Others might say I'm full of something else, but that's their opinion.
Bags?
Yes.
Well, give the spaghetti sauce a few hours.
And quote added. All right.
Well, you added a quote.
Nice.
It's like, okay,
Wait,
I gotta write that one down before I forget.
I thought we just did.
Yeah, but the bot that controls my quote page is run through Nightbot through Twitch.
Oh, okay.
Goodness.
Well, the only reason why I'm asking is because I see it coming. I see it on the side there. And so I'm like, we're on Twitch? Because
I'm not made of homemade spaghetti
He's full
sauce
of
and spunk. I'm full of homemade spaghetti sauce and spunk.
Okay, well, I can fix
I've
that
heard it
later.
both ways.
You haven't heard it both ways. You've seen it one way.
All right. Oh, by the way, did we get the room, the escape room?
Yes.
Awesome. What time?
11 o'clock on Thursday.
All right. Oh, so near the start.
Unfortunately, it's at the exact same time as the Cosmere cooking show that I'll have to miss, but
that's what VCR
is
for.
Oh man, you didn't give me much heads up to make the drive.
What?
Drive? What?
Never mind.
No, we're just confused because you weren't invited. So
I was making it.
I know. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I'm very. I don't even know what's happening.
Looney was joking that we were talking about an escape room, and he was like, "Well, I was planning to come, but you didn't give me much time." And
oh, okay. And I was over here just completely missing the joke.
You can come on down to New Orleans,
and I'm responding with bold marinara. So
that's a spicy.
You're always welcome at Casa de Kami.
All right, thank you, Kami.
Because true friends make bread.
Let's do this.
Break it together, yeah.
Silence!
Yeah, exactly. There's something wrong with that poor cauliflower.
So, when I was but a young lad, freshman year of college, a good friend of mine, Mitchell, brought us into his dorm room because he was freaking out because there was something awesome on the computer, specifically the internet, footage from E3.
graphics that were previously
this is Valve
possible outside of
showing
Hollywood
off
studio.
what they can do with the frickin' Source 2 engine. And this started us getting so hyped for Half-Life 2. This is episode 37 of I Think We Overleveled, where we are talking about Half-Life 2 documentary that Valve made. Because this demonstration right here is one of the coolest things as far as getting me hyped for a game I've ever seen. Because this changed everything. Did you guys see this trailer at all?
No.
I didn't know anything about Valve or Half-Life until I came and visited you. Like, we had roomed together before, and then you'd moved out, and you were playing Half-Life 2, and you were gushing about the gravity gun.
Yeah. So here, there's like this scene right here. They're just using the G-Man to show off how detailed their facial stuff is, and the fact that they could actually change how the lips move depending upon what language it was speaking. Which at the time was just so next level.
Yeah. In that era, most of the voice acting, it was like you basically had puppet mouth and then spoke whatever over it.
Yeah.
That was a fun part of the documentary, like when they discussed how they, basically mapped all of that out, and they came up with it. Like,
Yeah.
And as somebody, as possibly the only person here who has never played Half-Life 1 or 2,
Shame.
the documentary was just fascinating on a level of, watching what they did to do some of the stuff, and listening to how they came up with things and just how they approached designing it. It was a very well done documentary.
Yeah. This part right here, in the just them showing off the gravity gun for the first time, which at the time we just thought was going to be a dev tool. But just seeing how things bend and move in natural ways. Like, obviously the watermelon wasn't, but like all those rebar and the
What are you talking
ragdoll.
about? When you shoot a watermelon, it doesn't just split perfectly in half?
No, I don't have cooking skills like you. That's clearly in the cooking tree, right?
Apparently.
So this was also around the same time that the I want to say Steam was released.
So they talk about this in the documentary, how
because in 2003 it's actually when I first tried out Steam, because
it wouldn't have been 03. It didn't, because it came out with Half-Life 2.
So when did it come out? Because I remember at least it would have been 2004.
Yeah, it would have been around that time. I forget the exact timing, but basically this is a big thing they talk about in the documentary itself. Maybe I should start pulling that up.
Because that's when I made a Steam account and put in old Half-Life CD keys in there to register. Because even though that was a physical copy of a game that you had to use the CD key on the CD, but you could register it to Steam, and that's how I got the original Half-Life on Steam. Though I didn't like Steam back then. It was kind of awful back then, but it was brand new at the time.
So this is
what was going on behind the scenes when all this was going on.
So I was aware. So this is a big part of the documentary. The Vivendi lawsuit. For those who haven't watched the documentary, which again we highly recommend you watch the documentary. Vivendi was their publisher for the original Half-Life, and
not exactly.
Yeah,
Vivendi was a French company that bought out Sierra.
Sorry, yes, that's right. Sierra was the original.
Hold on, have we even introduced, even told them what documentary we're talking about?
Yes, we have not.
Yeah, it's the Valve Half-Life 2 documentary. They just released it. It's it's a little over 2 hours long. And
it was a 20th anniversary documentary.
Yeah, 20th anniversary. That's right. Yeah. Which actually, now that I think about it, I don't think my description updated correctly to have it in there. Let's make sure to fix that.
Did you see that Medic Amiibo?
They did something like they did something like what was it? It was 36 interviews over 5 countries with pretty much like crews like running around the clock, like talking to all the people that they did in there. Like it was exceptionally interesting. I mean, they even got Gabe in there
There he is.
for a good bit of it.
There
Yep,
is indeed.
Looking so much thinner.
Thank you and have fun.
1, 2, and 4.
And I don't know how much you want to get into the lawsuit just yet, but like I found that
let's get that
the
was
most
to me one of the
interesting,
one of the most interesting parts. I knew
Okay.
about the lawsuit.
Okay,
I
I don't
didn't know
know about
what
the lawsuit.
about
I
it.
didn't get that deep into the documentary. So what
Kami,
lawsuit
why
are
don't
we
you
talking about?
set it up?
So what originally happened was Sierra got bought out by Vivendi, which is a French company, and that was the genesis for all of this. When that happened, there was some renegotiation of rights over Counter-Strike and some other games that Sierra had been distributing for them, in which they
Okay.
did it. Vivendi decided that they didn't like the way things were negotiated and the contract that was agreed upon, so they started selling Counter-Strike to internet cafes, in which Valve went, hey, that's not a part of that, and they
Wait.
tried to basically negotiate it out with them, were summarily ignored, and then filed suit saying,
Okay,
hey, this isn't
Ta-
what
ta-
this
take
was
a
about.
take a step back. Wait, how is Valve? Is Valve connected to Sierra?
Sierra was their distributor.
Sierra was their distributor
Okay.
Yeah,
just
early on.
when we're talking about Sierra, for me that is King's Quest, Space Quest,
Yep.
Yeah,
Police Quest,
That's
all
Sierra.
of those.
Yep, that's
Right,
Sierra.
but like I didn't even know that there was a connection between Valve and Sierra.
Yeah, they were the
like
original
it-
distributor for Valve.
Okay.
And so,
but specifically, the terms were only for physical distribution.
Right.
Okay.
and so they start selling copies to internet cafes.
Digital copies?
And
Yes.
yes.
Okay.
And they try to go through. It's like, hey, this isn't really what was happening. They were summarily ignored, and then Valve files suit saying, hey, you haven't listened to us in good faith, and so now we're filing suit, and we want, And there was also some royalties disputes about this as well, going on as well. And as they put in it, this was supposed to be a little skirmish, and then Vivaldi decides to go World War III. Vivendi, and they just count. They just.
I don't think the famous composer decided to go ham on Valve.
Like, I have no intention of giving this company any respect if they're still on the face of the planet.
They are.
But regardless of the fact, they start like really just like
one of the things they talk about in this.
You ask if they're still on the face of the planet. I believe they're owned by Activision now. So.
Yeah.
And also from bad to worse.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, so the thing that they talk about is that in this time, the distributors / publishers sort of just had a history of bullying around the smaller development companies, because that's just what that was the relationship. And so Valve sort of pushing back was a little bit against what normally would happen. And Vivendi decided they would really put their muscle behind this, because it wasn't just about this. It was about every other fight after. It's full Ender Wiggin. And
to continue on, like to tell you how they were bent on destroying Valve, not just Valve. They sued Valve the company. They sued Gabe and his wife.
Yeah, they wanted to scare them into compliance.
And the other owner and the other owner's wife. As a matter of fact, they were served papers in the evening, or real late at night at their personal homes for the suit, which they were talking to their lawyer at the time, and the lawyer who was interviewed for this. Which is like I never heard anything of this, and I
think I may have found the timestamp for some of this.
But like when they talk about how bad it really got. Like, there is a very easy reality where Half-Life doesn't come out because it got so
Yeah, here
close.
I think I found the
When we
spot.
said, "Hey, the cyber cafe thing, you
got so
really
close,
can't do
like,
that." Coming on
If you guys
top
wanna
of
listen,
a year
was about to put his
torturous
house
negotiations
on the market.
I think
That's
that
how.
just
how
Can you
low
not
in
hear
funds
this,
they were.
Kamizite?
No.
Okay, y'all
You
want
need,
wanna
you need to turn your
unmute it.
You need to turn your volume up on watch anything.
Okay.
struck an angry court. We ended up filing the lawsuit, but really just on this narrow thing of like, hey, court, will you go just read this language and say, are they outside the license or not? And Vivendi decided to go World War III.
You filed our case in Seattle, federal court in Seattle, and they hired a law firm to defend it, of course. There was some initial skirmishing about discovery. There were some disputes and motions that had to be decided by the judge. And those.
For the record, this guy's last name is Quackenbush, and I love that.
I knew a Quackenbush.
I've heard it before, but it's whenever I hear it, it's just one of the funniest last names that is sort of common.
I don't know. It just makes me think of hunting.
Kind
And a
of.
laughing dog for some reason.
Those went all Valve's way. And then suddenly, the law firm disappeared. They hired a big scary law firm from San Francisco. They thought, okay, Valve's had some success in this case, and so we need to change their mindset from we think we're going to be successful to we're going to be destroyed. The next thing we knew, here comes this big stack of counterclaims, everything from canceling the 2001 agreement.
One of the other things, just as you watch this, you know that Valve has used their Steam money to make their base of operations absolutely awesome.
Yeah.
Like
Really
they have a wall that's like the wall in Half-Life 2. They have murals of the G-Man. It is insane.
To obtaining ownership
Valves.
of all the Half-Life IP, to keeping us from doing Steam, to you name it, where they included Scott and Julie Lynch and Gabe and Lisa Newell, his wife at that time, personally, as defendants.
And so it was kind of like, well,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Vivendi went scorched earth. And
Now, do we want to talk all the way through the lawsuit at this point?
Let's end that thing because basically they did the common giant corporation to smaller corporation move of just make big claims and drag it out in court as long as possible to make it very, very expensive because you can afford it, they can't.
So it's just another abuse of the process is the punishment.
Yeah.
Oh,
well,
yeah.
to
But,
the
I mean,
point
like,
that
they
Gabe
asked-
sold his house.
Did he sell it? Like they mentioned him putting it on the. He asked
yeah.
if he should put it on the market. I don't ever actually remember them actually saying he did so, but it wouldn't
yeah.
surprise me because that's how close they were. Like he was,
and
they were running out of money quickly.
Yeah.
But actually, like, there's a great quote from Gabe in here where they ask him about it, and he's just like, I didn't really have an emotional reaction about it. Like, this was just the way forward. Like, there was this one time in Africa where, like, I got bit with a shark and by a shark, and
let's see if I
everyone
can
was like
find
freaking out. It's
that.
like, oh no, I got bit by a shark, but
I think
it's just, I got bit by a shark. Yeah, like he's just. It's just like, are you just like have you just like ascended to Keanu Reeves level of Zen?
I think I have that part.
Or has Keanu Reeves ascended to Gabe level of Zen?
The
I
company
mean, that's
was
a
pretty
good-
close to
that's a
going
good
bankrupt.
question.
I was pretty close to going personally bankrupt. We went all in. It's like there was no money left. Like
How anxious was that for you personally?
I don't know. There's certain things that I'm kind of a weird person in a number of dimensions. Like I don't really think, oh, this is super scary. Like I don't have an emotional response to it. I just say, well, this is this is what we're doing. This is how, and we'll see how it plays out. So I don't think it was super stressful to me, right? I mean, it didn't really bother me. Like, I was diving in South Africa recently, and a shark tried to bite me a couple of times, and the people around me were way more freaked out than I was. I was like, oh, a shark's trying to bite me. I should get away from the shark. Whereas other people were having like, oh, a shark, it's trying to bite somebody, and I just think that's how I'm wired. I don't think it's anything that speaks to my character or anything. It's like I just seem to not get particularly agitated around risk, which probably means I take on more risk than at times than most sane people would, which can be a positive, or you can wreck a bunch of other people's lives being in the neighborhood of your risk indifference.
So,
would you look at that?
That's probably why he's so successful, though, because he takes risks that I'd be terrified to do.
Well, so this is the thing that's interesting with this story, is because one of the things they talk about, because they ask a bunch of the employees about the lawsuit, and they talk about how we weren't really aware of what was going on. We knew there was a lawsuit, but they did a good job of making it seem like not a big deal, so that, we could just focus on making the game and such. But we had no clue. Yeah, we didn't know how close we were to bankruptcy as a result of it.
And as I mentioned in the pre-cook, like, there's a turn in here that's Hollywood-esque.
Yeah, I'm trying to find it.
And while Splice finds it, I'll set it up. So basically, like, it's getting bad. Like, we're getting like Newell's putting his house up. Like, he is running out of money. He is like going through all of the liquid. It's going on fumes. It's looking like Half-Life 2 is not going to come out. It looks like Steam is not going to happen. They're being buried in they're like, this is the big corporation thing where they're just dropping everything that they can in Discovery, and it's all in Korean on top of all of that. So they have to they have to sit there and they have to try and find something to go through all of this, because none of them speak Korean. And so Valve had an intern for that summer who spoke Korean, and they asked him.
I think he was Korean, wasn't he?
He was from South Korea, or he'd spent some time there. They didn't really make it clear as to whether he was from there or not, but he basically spoke Korean, and they asked him to go through some documents and see what they said. And apparently he came across an email to from the vice president of Valdi or whatever, saying, "Hey, did you destroy those documents I told you to destroy?"
No, it was the opposite. It was the Korean company saying, "Hey, we destroyed those documents.
Those documents that you told me to destroy." And the lawyer was like, "Okay,
I think I found it.
Are you sure that's what they said?" And he was like, "Yes, I'm sure that's what they said. That is exactly what this says." And so he takes that to,
okay, I found it.
The other lawyers, and the other lawyers were like,
chunk of documents in Korean. They were in Korean. I mean, everything from email to contracts to you name it.
And one of the things they were doing is just dumping huge amounts of Discovery on it to force us to go and just have somebody go and look through it. It's like, oh.
This is a very common tactic in lawfare. It's you either give them no Discovery, or you give them so much Discovery they can't possibly go through everything.
Oh, look, they ordered sandwiches again, right? It has nothing to do with the lawsuit. It's just an attempt to overwhelm us with tens of millions of pages of documents on the assumption that there's nothing in it that will be particularly problematic for their case. They will eventually just will either spend a bunch of money, which plays into their hands, or will just eventually give up because it's finding a needle in the haystack. And then we found the needle in the haystack, and that changed things quite dramatically.
It just so happened that there was an intern, summer associate, who was a native Korean speaker. And
for the record, the best money spent on an intern ever, possibly.
Yeah, in the history of the world.
Look at this pile here, and can you just tell me what's in there?
I would guess that particular intern probably went through a couple thousand documents that day, and only one was consequential.
And they said, well, there's these other emails between these vice presidents where one says something like, "Hey, we destroyed those Valve documents like you asked." And I said, "Are you sure it says that?" And I said, "Yeah, that's what it says." And so, of course, that led to a conversation between me and the lawyer for the other side about, hey, it looks like your guys are destroying evidence. What's up with that? They wrote back and said, you're out of your mind. Whoever translated doesn't know what they're talking about. And I talked to Andrew again. I said, well, it looks like we're going to have a kind of a fight about this. Are you, we're going to need an affidavit from you about your translation. Can you tell me a little bit about your Korean skills? He goes, well, I'm a native speaker. At UCLA, I majored in Korean language studies. And I said, that's good. That sounds like we're in good shape.
The assistant general manager in Korea sending the letter to the general manager of Korea saying, I have destroyed those documents related to the Valve case as directed, which I think is one of Carl's happiest moments as a lawyer in his entire career. Just like stuff like this never, ever happens.
I did a lot of lawsuits for a long time. I never saw anything like that. Never. Maybe there was document destruction that couldn't be proved, but that was like, we're talking about it in writing. I'd never seen that
in
before.
writing.
At that point, Judge Zilli said, all matters of fact are now, according to Valve, you don't get to contest any of those. Now we're just discussing how much you're going to have to pay and what the damages are.
And Gabe was still pretty mad. He was mad. He really didn't want to settle. He was mad enough that he wanted to keep going. But I remember sitting down with Carl and having a conversation with Carl, and I was like, so Carl, what do you think? Should we settle at this point? Is the right number? And he was like, well, there's this old saying, there's a difference between being a pig and a hog.
Yeah.
I think there's a little blurb at the end of this.
Carl was done with it.
No, there we go. Okay.
Well, I love how he says he was mad and the camera cuts to the crowbar.
Yep.
No,
but yeah, so that was a big deal because, they almost bankrupt Valve right as Steam was getting off the ground.
And so, before we get into the rest of the stuff, which probably I won't be as big of I want to also state that after I watched this, I did go and I looked through the internet before we came on the air and reading a lot of opinion pieces about, and this might be a good point to pause here and have a discussion about this. So let's say they don't find that email. What does modern gaming look like without Half-Life 2, without Steam?
Yeah.
Like,
it's at a different point, and it's probably gonna be too hard for me to find. But at another point in the thing, Gabe talks about how they were real big on digital distribution because this is the nascent years where people are like, you're not going to be able to distribute games over the internet. That's too much bandwidth. It's just not. It's not possible. People want they're going to want to go into a store and get a physical thing and.
Literally said 99% of the companies that they talked to about it laughed them out the door.
Well, to be fair, as a customer, I still want physical copies and to go pick it up at the store.
Yeah, but the difference is you want that, and there's definitely a market for that. But at the same time, the ability to get things digitally, that's the future.
Well, I go on a rant. Like, I still feel that buying digital, it's like I'm not going to pay the same price that I expect to pay a physical copy. I'm not going to pay as much. And to Valve's credit and Steam's credit, usually you can get them dirt cheap because like I feel like a digital copy is worth less by a lot than a physical copy, but Steam allows you to buy it at a lot less because they have sales all the time and they drop the price. I mean, like, I never buy a brand new game on Steam because it's too expensive. But yeah, I mean, it's a service issue, and
and one of the parts that people don't talk about, because in many respects, Valve has done a lot of things that are very negative to what we would say as gamers. Like, they're the ones who invented loot boxes through TF2. They forced everyone to download Steam in order to play Half-Life 2. And these are things that I don't like it when other companies do it. But
Yeah,
we let
I
Valve
hated
get away
Steam
with it.
back in 2004. Yeah.
Yeah, but this is the brilliance of Steam, and is it's a really good service, and it's good for all parties involved, because like you talk to developers, especially smaller ones, and they're like, yeah, like I love Steam. They only take 30% compared to, if you're buying physical, that's 50%. Plus you have all your costs of getting it physical out there.
Yeah, Pirate Software has gone on about that actually.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I've thought
seen
about
that.
if I were to try and be an indie developer, yeah, I would absolutely release on Steam. I would like to be able to have the option to make like cool physical stuff, but before I have, when you're an indie and don't have the manufacturing capabilities, Steam is the way to go. There's no doubt about that.
I mean, look at the success of games like Stardew Valley.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
and what's the physical market is becoming sort of a boutique experience. Very similar, I think Baggins will probably agree, to like leather-bound books in the literature space.
Yeah, it's
Records
become
in the music
physical
space.
copies have become collector's items rather than just. I mean, and that's true of physical copies of old games now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting turn, but the thing is, it allows these smaller companies to get a leg up. One of the other things they do that's interesting that Pirate Software was talking about is how you can go to Steam and be like, hey, I need this number of CD keys, and they'll give it to you. And they don't, well, it's not just that. They don't make you sell it on Steam. You can generate the keys through Valve and sell them on like good old games.
Or Humble Bundle or stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they don't even force you to stay in their ecosystem,
which is impressive.
Yeah,
they're confident
places
in,
don't. Yeah,
in their
most
market.
places don't let you do that at all.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, and their confidence, I feel, is merited, because I remember when I originally bought the orange box, that's the reason I ever downloaded Steam. I was like, why do I have to put this extra program on my computer? And now, almost 20 years later, or I guess 16 years later, maybe, I've got hundreds of games on Steam now.
Yeah. And like, again, like to also add to this, like with the physical, like records are collector's items, like something that was a big deal lately in the tabletop thing was is that Wizards of the Coast floated about a year ago. You guys, what if the physical books, what if those were just a limited release, something for the collectors? And
it went over great because
house.
Wizards of the Coast does absolutely everything correctly.
Exactly. It went over about as you expected it to. I'm not going to say there were pitchforks involved, but there probably
were rocks and windows involved.
Wait,
there were probably rocks and windows.
Wait, what did I spend $30 on then?
I mean, no, like they absolutely like backtracked on that, like everything they've done in the last 2 years. But
what am I supposed to do with this pitchfork now?
Oh, pitchfork! You paid $30 for a pitchfork. I've got a pitchfork guy, man. You got to talk to me. Talk to me before you make these purchases. I got a pitchfork guy. I could get you like 2 of them for that price, or 3 even. Like I know Splice. I have to have a pitchfork guy.
I like the boutique experience.
Well, that's fair enough.
Yeah, you pay for the service.
But
again, which I was just wondering, how would you guys feel like? So, in the last 10 years or so, they've completely gotten rid of instruction manuals.
What if
there were fan-made instruction manuals of like newer games? Would you buy them?
Possibly, if they were quality.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah.
Instruction manuals are kind of a thing that I like them, but at the same time, they're not like a huge value add.
Well, that's why he's saying, like, if it was a fan-made thing that was a collector's.
I mean, not all instruction manuals are made equally. Like some have like a lot of cool like full color art all over it, and
and story and
story stuff and
It's one of those
Yeah, I
things
mean-
that I see why it's gone away.
I
see
understand why it's gone
but-
away, but it's an experience. Like, it was part of the game buying experience.
It
for me as a
absolutely
kid.
was. 100%.
Buying going out, buying a game, and reading the instruction manual on the way home.
Or look at the artwork in there. I'd purposely play the game before reading the instructions because, I don't know, that was the way I rolled. But I liked seeing the artwork.
Right, the artwork was bomb, like Final Fantasy's artwork and stuff like that. And I know we're getting a little bit, a little away from it, but I mean, like, Gabe, if you're listening, like, maybe a digital like control manual part of the experience to the side there.
You guys might want to mute for this part. I'm just turning on for ambience.
Oh, okay.
So this is the start of it, where I subtly changed the topic, where you see a lot of the visual inspirations for the areas in City 17, where they went to these train yards and stuff like that. And
It looks familiar.
Yeah. Well, and so the thing that's interesting, because they were trying to figure out where to place things. And, with a storyline of an occupation, and they actually struggled for a while trying to figure out what the story of Half-Life 2 would be. And like they had Gordon fighting aliens and stuff, but they couldn't, like, they didn't have it quite tied together until they finally like brought in the, it's like, oh, we could have some other people who like maybe were survivors of the Black Mesa incident here. And then they started coming up with characters. And once they started coming up with characters, they realized, oh, they were there too with him. Oh, these would be his friend. Oh, they're a resistance. And they start kind of piecing things together. And it's interesting because they then quite naturally moved the storyline to an Eastern European country, because these countries have been, just ravaged by war and occupied by one faction or another all over the place. And it just worked. It suddenly worked.
Which unfortunately hasn't changed. Oh,
Yeah,
goodness.
It's history. And so as they started working together, started coming up with the idea of the Combine and the design aesthetic, and how they wanted all the creatures to look like you didn't know if they were natural things that were experimented upon, or if they were things that were made and then like something grew into it. And just going completely body horror with the enemies. It's a very fascinating design choice. Half-Life is one of the most scary is not usually the word I'd use for Half-Life. It is horrifying. Which, I don't know, there's a subtle difference there that I don't know quite how to describe.
Well, it's not like jump scares most of the time.
There is, but that's just head crabs and zombies.
Well, yes, but I don't know. I never thought of it really as a horror game, even though I guess people refer to it. But what you're talking about is kind of the whole fridge horror. It's the more you think about it, the more horrifying it is as a concept.
Disturbing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm going for. Disturbing.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's one of those small things where the more you look at it, it's just a terrifying game. The other thing that's interesting is hearing them talk about the development process, because it's the other thing listening to this documentary that really goes to show how unique this game is it exists on one of these precipices of gaming where things were about to change, and Valve was the company that was ahead of the curve. But one of the things that's interesting is they talk about how they were sort of winging it a lot of the way, and they weren't as specialized as people get nowadays, as people have made more games, they've figured out how to streamline the process more, right? Because they now have experience. But it's because they're sort of winging it, it had this huge collaborative effort where they're figuring things out on the fly that they say even at Valve now, it just wouldn't be done like that anymore because they've made enough games where they know, like, okay, we can't just, wing it. That's what causes us to take 7 years to make a game and almost go bankrupt. That's not a sustainable path.
The almost
I don't think they
part of it was not necessarily because they were taking too long. It was because they were getting sued by some
but you open yourself up to that risk, like where
at the same time it's not like they develop games any faster today. But
no, but now it's because, in all honesty, that's another thing they talk about is episode, because they go into episode 1 and 2 and why there was no 3.
Half-Life 3 confirmed.
I was really hoping for that at the end of this documentary, for the record.
That would have been something, wouldn't it?
But no, the thing they talk about is you get the impression that, like, because they're looking back, they're like, oh my goodness, and they're talking quite fondly of how they were sort of in crunch mode for 2 straight years to get the game out, because
they had doing this 10 hours a day, 7 days a week for 18 months.
And they recall it fondly because they were all doing it, but you can tell it's like, now they have kids, now they have lives, now they would never
do that again.
Yeah, they're never going to do that again. They don't want to. That's just the natural order of life. Is like there's certain things you'll do when you're young and hungry that you won't once you've eaten. And they were. The other thing is they talk about how they had these ideas for, this game, and they didn't really have a concept when they came up with it for how big in scope they were making this project, that they were blowing the project to just levels beyond for example, the facial animations they went into, they talk about hiring
was so interesting.
Facial experts so that they can map out what the human face is, so they can kind of put things down to understand how the face actually works, so that people don't move around like Muppets.
Not just that, but also going through the way they paid apparently some of the characters was just like, oh yeah, there's this guy with the sign that stands there by the freeway.
The fact that
we should
Eli
get him in here. He's got a real great face. And he was like, "What he? I don't know Half-Life." So he was he was apparently.
You'll give me money.
Well, no, they used his face, and he's a pretty major character, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it's Eli. He's one of the big characters. Eli Vance. He's the leader of the Resistance.
Eli's face was taken from some guy that gave a few $100 that was just grifting on the side of an exit.
And by that we mean literally grifting, not.
That was the going rate. That wasn't hey, we can just get away with paying this guy nothing. It was just
But they're showing off all the people whose faces they found to just use in this game.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see if I can
find.
Wasn't
there a guy who worked downstairs or?
Yeah. Okay. Actually, I want to do this. Is a voice actor,
an accountant or something.
Yeah. Just okay. Turn your sound back on. They brought on the guy who does the voice for Doctor. Oh my goodness! Why am I blanking on his name all of a sudden?
I don't know.
My name is Harry Robbins. I'm known as Hal Robbins. I have a stage name of Dr. Hal. My only doctorate is in theology from the Church of the Subgenius, which I'm involved in.
So this guy's just a radio host for a religious program that one of the devs listened to. And he loved his voice, and so they brought him on.
Well, I think perhaps Mark was familiar with the things I do on the radio, and he thought my voice would be good for it. I have a monthly Ask Dr. Hal show on Twitch and Zoom, and I'm also on a couple of radio shows. Well, I'm a graphic artist. I've worked for DC Comics, for Isaac. Make sure to aspirate to consonants. For example, I don't say didn't the way most people do, even newscasters today. I always make sure to say didn't. Perhaps it sounds archaic that way. Mark wrote archaic expressions into my dialogue, and I would say things like, oh, fie, and so forth.
No, not up there! No! Careful, Lamar. Those are quite fragile! Oh, fie. It'll be another week before I can coax her out of there.
Yeah, longer if we're lucky.
Oh, okay, so not Breen. Okay, I was wrong.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, not Breen, but why am I blanking on his name?
Yeah.
It was his yeah.
I'm looking.
He said he's known as Dr. Hal.
Yeah,
Kleiner.
Dr. Hal.
Kleiner. Dr. Kleiner.
Yeah.
No, and so, so they literally were just you can mute it again if you want. They were literally just grabbing faces and voices that they just thought kind of worked. And it's really cool. Like just the fact that it was kind of cobbled together.
It's actually seriously kind of amazing.
Well, it's just something that you wouldn't see in a lot of modern productions, because they would look at like, for example, just grabbing the face of some guy on the side of the road, and I'm willing to bet like someone would be like, ooh, I don't know, like that could open us to some risk for this thing. Let's pay for an actor, very reasonable stuff, in terms of liability and stuff like that. But it goes to the winging it nature of this game, and how amazing and how overwhelming in scope it became as a result. And again, just their office, man, it looks so freaking cool. Again, that Steam money's paying for something.
Your office look like that at Splice.
Yeah, with all my office money. But another thing, let's see if I could find it here. Like, because they were winging it. Oh yeah, I think guess not. Okay, I think it'll come up here pretty soon. But one of the things they talked about is how they had to start standardizing things, because you have all these game developers, collaborating, making objects, and they realized everyone was sort of making things slightly different sizes. And so they made a map. I'm looking for it right now. That was just like, it was called like the dev scale map or something like that, where the whole point was to just have everything. Oh wait, I found the guy's face, I think. Yeah.
Yep, that's him.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the guy they found on the side of the road, and that's who became Dr. Eli Vance. That's awesome. I love stuff like that. I don't know why I love stuff like that, but it's just a really cool design detail,
It makes it feel more real when you're not looking to fill a character. You're just like, you see someone, you're like, oh, there he is.
Well, like one of the other ones that's somewhere in there is like which you're kind of seeing in the background here, all the extras. Like there's like, okay, we're in Eastern Europe. We need people to sort of look like it.
It's that. Yeah.
And so one of their developers, his heritage was from that area. And so they used his face for a lot of it. And it's just, I love those little details of thinking things through like that. Because a lot of times they don't. But yeah, one of the biggest ones was like, as you can see here, where they're showing all the ideas. And so they had to, because they had this whole idea of, we need to make these faces readable so you get invested in these characters much more. And so they put all this research into how faces move and what are the little micro expressions people make that we can see in an actual face that in gaming up until this point we hadn't seen it all. And So they're doing that, but then the problem was they're like, okay, the face is looking good, but these eyes are so dead and glassy. And so then they get like an eye expert onto the team, and he's helping them figure out how do you get this to move correctly so that these eyes feel like there's actually a person behind them and not just a doll. And they had to go through all these little smaller things like how do the eyes move when you're looking to the side versus looking straight on, because those are two different things, and the muscles twitch, and then as eyes move that actually forces the face to move. And it was one of those things they talked about how they didn't know how absolutely big this was getting as they scoped it out.
It kind of reminds me of the stories that Pixar would tell, where with each movie they added something in that was just like completely out there. The Incredibles is the one that comes to mind. The underwater hair, for Elastigirl, and it just kind of each time they did it, it actually revolutionized the industry.
Yeah, they talked about how I remember that where they talked about basically from Toy Story to Coco, there was something that they were having to break new ground on with each film.
Mm-hmm.
Just portraying things in reality.
Like with hair, I remember, wasn't Brave and Merida's hair a huge deal?
That was
That was Disney.
Yeah, it was the bigger one was
no,
Brave
that was Pixar. Never mind. I'm wrong.
The bigger one for hair was Monsters Inc. with Sully.
Mm-hmm.
Because they had
all
never
the individual
had
hairs on him. Yeah,
they'd never done that before. And then Incredibles was cloth and long hair with the Violet.
Mm-hmm.
And then
underwater.
Then they did underwater, and then Finding Nemo was actually how do we portray underwater light physics and but it's very much like that. And so that by itself would have been enough to justify a game's inclusion by itself. But one of the big selling points of this game wasn't just that. Like, that would have been just fine. But they took it to the next level with the physics of the game, which I think I want this clip.
Jay Stelly was the one who really wrote the wrapper on that integrated it.
And physics was even early in the project was pretty successful. Right? Once we got over the initial thing of like things falling over, and we started adding breakable objects, things you could script and hammer. We added vehicles, sound cues from all the objects, and the AIs, you could drop things on them and crush them, things like that. All of those behaviors, once we got just a few of those things in, that was really fertile.
For everyone who worked on Half-Life 2, masses got broken down into a set of scales that I assume someone's already talked about. No? Okay.
Well, you say.
So yeah. All right. So the question is whether it's bigger than a bread box or smaller than a space station.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's
it's on over here, and it's definitely playing on the stream.
Okay, well that's the thing.
No, you didn't. That's why
you didn't inform us that you were playing stuff on there, so we didn't know if it was awkward silence or not.
Got it. Okay.
Because you have to tell us to unmute it.
And the text says,
so that we hear it too.
"Oh, this thing weighs as much as a racehorse."
Yeah. You knew it was more than a bread box.
You're like, well,
but not as much as a space station.
I think so, but I don't know in the scale if it's closer to this or closer to that.
Yeah, because
refrigerator.
Refrigerator. This all came from, at some point, I think it was David Spira.
Yeah.
So you could look at any entity in the game and turn on a bunch of debugging text about it. And one of the most important things to get right in every object in the game that was physically simulated was its mass, because that dictated an enormous amount of things, like the amount of force it would apply to something else when it hit them, and amount of force, its response when it's hit by something else, all that stuff. Had to get it right. But of course, like, mass is just a number. Like, what does this mean to anyone? And so I think it was David Spira who found online some list of masses and objects, and he just brought that into the game so that when you looked at an object, it'd say like 100 bracket racehorse or something.
And so over time, like, you all just got that locked in, and because it was like a logarithmic scale, it went from things like, bread box, paint can or something, up to like space stations.
Yeah, the moon.
You're
like, what?
So,
what do we do with this? At this point, it's just keyframe at that point.
Yeah, so there would be many like conversations where we'd say, so I don't know, do you think that's more like a racehorse or the space station?
But I love that, because this game, the physics puzzles are so key to it. And yeah, they are just numbers, and so you do need sort of a scale.
Numbers are important.
They are. But it's no, but it's that whole thing of you got to put a weight to it. One of the things, and it's a longer one, where they bring in the car, which, deals with the antlions and stuff like that. And how, in reality, if you look at how fast the car's going, it's only going about 15 miles per hour. Because making it go any faster than that would be very difficult to program a game around, because you would have to put so much space between locations to make a faster speed matter. And they realized very quickly, it doesn't matter how fast you're actually going. What matters is how fast the player feels they're going. Mm-hmm. And they realized they could fake it with sound design mostly. And so they started studying how gear shifting works to give the impression of speed, so that it felt way faster than it really was, which I found fascinating. Just because I know Bill did some Foley work back in the day, and it's getting to yeah, but it's one of those things where this is the era of gaming where suddenly they're moving like closer and closer to like movie techniques as they're getting more and more realistic. And it's a very difficult process that they're talking about, because you're trying to balance between how do we make this game act like a game and how do we get things to feel cinematic? How do we give the impression of things? And it's starting to blur the lines in a way that I don't think they anticipated when they started making the game. Because I remember watching like an Overwatch sound panel, and they talk about how, because the sound has two components, like the actual sound, but then how does that sound interact with the player? And so they have like a dynamic system of, if something's very dangerous to you, it gets put in the priority and it'll be louder than just if someone was, just walking, for example. And so it's just one of those things that I sit there and I marvel that they're having to start to think in very, very large terms of how does it make the player feel. They also talked about how they did a lot of player testing to make the game. Like they'd give them small segments and think, all right, this makes sense. And then they'd see what the players would do, and they'd be sitting there in horror, like, oh no, they're looking at all the wrong things. They have no clue what to do. They look so frustrated. What have we done? It's a fine line between hand holding, because you don't want to hold the hand too tightly, because then you're just railroading them. But at the same time, you don't want them to get too frustrated. I don't know. I find it very fascinating. I'm looking for a specific part as well with the Bill knows is one of my favorite parts, the airboat. You were gonna say something,
as somebody who never played the game, the only thing reference I had for this going into this today when I watched it was, I know this is a legendary game that a lot of people played. It just was never one that I did, and just watching the level of detail and just the care that was put into this, and plus doing the added layer of just like they almost didn't make it. They almost didn't make the finish line there. Was was probably the most fascinating part. And it does genuinely seem like it's a labor of love from from almost everyone they talk to. So, I think that like the entirety of it, just as not somebody who was into the game, but just somebody who enjoys games and got to see just how this game was made from the people who made it. That by itself was probably the most interesting part to me. Talking about, everything that we've been talking about thus far, how they came up with the faces. Who would have thought like 20 years ago, besides these guys, like, hey, maybe let's go find somebody who's an expert on faces so that we can make our faces not seem so dead. That's it seems like a no-brainer when you think about it, but it obviously wasn't at some point.
Yeah, well, and it makes sense because before we talk about like the old era of games like the 70s and 80s where it's just, a guy in his bedroom and just sort of puttering around and figuring out how to make the hardware do something. And then it becomes two guys, and then it becomes, like a full team of like 90 developers or whatever it was for this game, but they don't have enough knowledge. And so now they're having to pull people who are experts in completely different fields in order to get this right. And it goes to the collaborative nature of this interactive medium that nothing else can really compare to. Now, I'm looking for a specific spot because I'm excited to see reactions, because they talk about in this thing episodes 1 and 2, and it's really interesting. But then they get into the fact that they never made Half-Life 3 episode 3 or Half-Life 2 episode 3. It's part of the joke of count to 3, right? And they then show off some of the stuff they had planned for 3. And they do talk a little bit about why it fell apart. And part of it was they kind of had Half-Life fatigue, if they're completely honest, but the episode concept just sort of didn't work for them. Like the whole idea was it was going to be smaller and we're going to be able to get them out faster, and then they just sort of didn't. And they just sort of said, this isn't really working, so we're going to abandon the plan. And then they started working on Left 4 Dead, and, they admit some of the things they thought were excuses are sort of dumb at the time, but it felt real. But they do show off some of the stuff they had already done for Half-Life 3. You're going to want to turn your sound on for this, because this is pretty cool.
Well, I worked on episode 3, and I was working on this gun called the ice gun that basically let you create amorphous shapes out of ice. So you could like raise a little ice wall in front of yourself. It would be attached to the floor, and then the Combine soldiers could shoot holes in it, and it would shatter and break like...
They invented Mr. Freeze's gun.
That's pretty cool.
Wait till you see some of the
Kinda
stuff
like
you
glass,
could
I
do
guess.
with it.
So that was the primary mode of you could build ledges for yourself to get down, cliff faces. It
Watch
had
this.
Another mode that was like a kind of like a Silver Surfer mode where you would extrude the ice in front of yourself and then run along it and use it to cross gaps, go over chasms and things like that.
Isn't that so freaking cool?
It's Frozone.
Yeah, it's Frozone,
It is, yeah.
Iceman. They invented it. And I'm just like, God, now I need this. Like, I'm now more mad than ever that this didn't come out. Like, you could also use it to. I'm wondering if it was too overpowered, because like they also show it like freezing enemies
It was
here.
set in the Arctic because it was centered around Borealis.
So I'm wondering if they're trying, like, does this gun trivialize gameplay,
No, because that's when you introduce enemies with like thermal armor or something. And
yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, you give the enemies heat weapons that can melt it and mess you up.
I think it'd be difficult to make some of their puzzles that they like to make, because I think it'd just trivialize it. But I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying it might introduce different design problems.
it's sort of like trying to do a jump puzzle when you've got flying.
Yeah. But that's not the coolest thing. I want to show you this enemy they created for it that I have never seen an enemy like this before, and I want it so bad.
I remember the little blobby, squishy.
Oh yeah. Brian was
guys,
working on the blobs. So we had the ISO surfaces that we ended up using in Portal for the paint. So we had that as an enemy. It was a blob enemy.
Look at this.
And it could change its shape, and you could choreograph its shapes with some content tools. And then it could also split into little hoppy blobs that could, they were almost like little head crabby things, but they were little splats that would hop around. And we were doing all kinds of stuff with that. It could pass through grates.
You could get more gameplay out of something where you had maybe a couple of creatures with simpler behaviors.
Oh yeah.
And then you would spend time combining them with other game mechanics.
The story was never the boss event.
I have never seen an enemy like that. Have you?
Well, I mean, in RPGs, but
yeah, I mean, like obviously in a live action game.
Yeah,
that
live
actually
action
behaves that way.
Well,
that actually behaves that way.
Live action.
Maybe a Metroidvania in 2D, but in 3D, no, I don't think so.
Like that is an ambitious enemy. Blob monster that actually acts like a blob. I want it so bad now.
I feel like I've seen something similar, but at this time, like at the time this was developed, absolutely not.
Yeah, it's just
Right,
I
right.
don't know,
No,
it
that
makes
makes
me
sense.
so bad that we never got episode 3.
Well, you go to Gabe and you demand your episode 3.
I'm sure he's never heard that. So
I'm sure he's never heard that. I'm sure it's going to go very well.
Mhm.
But no, and so it's interesting because they talk about the episode prop. So apparently they started working on episode 1 and 2 at the same time. And episode 1, they went more in on oh gosh, what were they talking about with episode 1? Do you remember? They updated
No, not
some,
off the top of my head.
Yeah, I can't remember.
Like I was
But-
cramming to be prepared today.
Yeah. Episode 2, they really overhauled like the AI behavior for other characters because you're with Alex the entire game mostly, and she's acting as a secondary companion, and so they needed a more robust AI for it. But basically they kept kind of increasing the scope of each game, and so by the end of it, it's like, okay, we just made a smaller version of Half-Life 2 again with more bells and whistles, and we've kind of defeated our own reason for doing episodic content. I don't know. It's one of those things where, again, they clearly have, what's the term? When project bloat, is that what it's called?
Creep?
Project creep. That's what I'm looking for. Project creep.
Scope creep?
Yeah, where they just get these ideas where they want to do stuff, and they're just like, yeah, these episodes aren't the best approach.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think they were probably having some Half-Life fatigue at this point, where they just wanted to move on to a different project. I mean, and they took some of the concepts, for AI behavior and put it into Left 4 Dead, so it's not like they wasted it, but it was just, I don't know, I'm intrigued by it. No, the other thing that was interesting with this, let's see if I can find it. Where was it? They're talking about, let's see, where was this? So when they're talking about the, I found it. Okay. We're talking about the multiplayer. Let's see if I can get the exact part. Multiplayer was a throw-in. that one of the developers was just sort of doing in his free time. And so he and his buddy were just sort of putzing around with the gravity gun in this multiplayer mode that they had just sort of made for the fun of it. And also to sort of test out, like, it's easier if you have two players in one space and they can interact with things, right? Because then you can toss things to each other and, you know, stuff like that. But they're like launching like radiators at each other with the gravity gun. And Gabe happened to walk by and he saw them. He's like, "What's that?" And they're like, "Oh, we made a multiplayer mode. Show that to me tomorrow." And he just sort of walked off.
Can you imagine?
Yeah, but you know, this is the basis for, you know, Half-Life Deathmatch, Counter-Strike 2, Team Fortress 2, and it was kind of invented by two guys in their free time.
Some of the best things come when it's people just sort of dinking around on a project that they want to see what happens with, though.
Yeah.
You know, it's why, I mean, they don't do it anymore, but Google Time was a thing that they had where, you know, you'd spend a certain percentage of your time working on independent projects where you kind of had free reign, and that's where some brilliance comes from.
Yeah. Well, and again, it goes back to this is a collaborative process. They're working together to make something.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a bunch of people trying to protect their little fiefdoms within a corporation that's grown too large. I think that's the thing that I appreciate the most about Valve is they've kind of kept it small, which makes their dominance so jaw-dropping.
And I love that.
You were saying something, Kamizai?
As small as you can keep a corporation that size these days.
Yeah,
but yeah.
But like, they're not trying to become Amazon or Google or Meta.
They know their lane and they're staying in it.
Mm-hmm.
And that is to be appreciated.
Well, that, and also they've become a very wealthy video game company, but I don't see them like buying studios left and right.
Right.
Because that would dilute the company.
Exactly.
Yeah, but that's the thing. But at the same time, they have sort of the market share as someone doing that, just with their model of Steam. No, we'll just make a storefront for you, and we'll be your distributor. And there's no complicated thing. It's just we're the storefront, and by doing that, they keep all of the companies that do this business with them as separate companies that they have no ownership over. And it keeps it separated enough that it prevents that, honestly, I guess, corporate rot that happens.
Mm-hmm.
But they're still a private company.
With large public companies.
They don't have to answer to anyone but their fans and themselves. And I guess the other gaming companies that they interact with, but...
Right.
But it's the simultaneous thing where it's also they don't have that desperate need anymore to release a game because you need the next injection of money.
True.
And so they release it. It's the whole joke of Valve time. They release it when they want to. It's what made when they finally released Half-Life Alyx, everyone's like, "Holy crap, you guys haven't made one of these style games in forever."
Mm-hmm.
And it's what's got me hoping hard that Half-Life 3 is actually real, since the ending of Alyx sort of brings it back towards the ending of episode 2. And I'm hoping. I want it so bad. I want to know how the story ends.
Well, there are already people saying, have they already teased it in this somewhere?
It feel like it's obviously spoiling it a bit, but it feels like they're trying to communicate that.
It does a little bit, doesn't it?
Well,
but at the same time...
Now, to be fair, I had the same thought when the Chalk Eaters Count to 3 video came out a few years ago because Gabe is on there, and it's just like, wait, what's happening? They're saying the valve starts to spin, and it's like, it
makes
want
me
it to
wonder.
happen.
It makes me wonder if there's something going on in the background.
He's just trying to hurt you again. Don't fall for it.
But
he won't hurt.
If they ever do announce it, it's going to be Gabe Newell coming out and saying Half-Life 3 confirmed. There's no other way they can do it. That's the only way they can do it at this point.
No, the way they're going to do it, it's going to be like a single tweet, like in the middle of some other big event out of nowhere. It just real quiet, and everyone's gonna be like, "I'm sorry, what?" And everyone else is, they're talking about some other thing, like I don't know, maybe in the middle of the Game Awards or something, but it's not at the Game Awards.
Half-Life 3 summer 2025. So, about that Assassin's Creed, how are we thinking that's gonna do this year?
Yeah, exactly. And everyone's like, "What? No, what happened?" It just shut everything down. That feels to be the most Valve thing to do.
What, just derail someone else? That's funny.
Yeah. Just like, or like, I don't know, like one of the big things that as I was watching election coverage last week, not to get into politics, but one of them was talking about, it's like, what? Like just yells it out of nowhere. Like, what are you talking about? Nintendo just dropped big news about the Switch 2. Because Nintendo confirmed like it's going to be backwards compatible in the middle of like election night coverage. They're like, Nintendo just pulled the most Nintendo thing ever.
I do remember that. Yeah,
just announcing it in the middle of when no one would be paying attention. Because that's just how Nintendo do. And I think Valve sort of has the same energy.
Nintendo got a Nintendo.
Yeah. And so it'll be in the middle of some crisis, and then everyone's like, holy crap, Half-Life 3. And that's how we avert World War 3, because everyone will agree we don't want to start World War 3 before Half-Life 3.
Yep.
No. This is seriously a really good documentary. I like that Valve's doing these, because they also did one for the 25th anniversary of the original Half-Life as well. Did that a year ago. So this is something clearly they've been they've started to putting some money into, which again goes into why it feels like they're building up to something, is what it feels like.
Or actually, you know what? Their accomplishments of the past, and this is building up to nothing.
Actually, you know what? What if their announcement for Half-Life 3 is they just drop a documentary on Half-Life 3, and that's how they announce it?
I wouldn't be shocked. I'm liking this trend of some of these companies doing these things. The company that really pioneered it is Double Fine. I think they've done this for 4 of their games now. Where they just have a film crew documenting them during the entire building process, because it gives
kind of it's kind of the Hearts of Darkness method.
What do you mean?
Well, what was it? Apocalypse Now and Hearts of Darkness. One of them was just a documentary of the movie as it was being made, and it was made alongside the movie.
Oh, I'd never heard of this.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I like that these companies are doing it, because it's also one of the things that the making of the making of these games is so arcane and foreign. It helps one put a human face to it, but it also, I think, is good because it shows the next generation of gamers what it takes to get something like this done, and what's realistic, and what are the slings and arrows, and what can you expect? And just as a fan, I like knowing this stuff. It's very interesting.
I actually think that is really important to kind of teach that to the next generation, because a lot of the current developers, even today, like, they went to school and the college that taught, here's, game development courses, and it's kind of this cookie cutter, like, how to. But when you look at the truly great things, they didn't have an instruction manual. They didn't have a teacher. They didn't have any of that. They had to struggle, and that struggle is what makes their products really stand out compared to the others that are much more, made using a formula,
Yeah.
And the classics is kind of the whole instruction. If you really want to make something great that's remembered and stands the test of time, you're going to have to ignore a lot of the stuff your professor told you.
Yeah,
and
this
I
is
think that's an important lesson.
Like some of the people they assembled early on, like there was like a couple there. It's like then there's like, well, we were in school together, and I dropped out and I joined this place, and you graduated, and then you came and joined me there, and then they were picked. Like these were like, this was back in the day before like game programming was like something people knew was in college. I'm not saying it wasn't in college, but
there wasn't a program for it. Partially because it's involved so much. Something that Baggins and I talk about this. There's a channel called Corridor Crew. It's they're computer No, they're great. They're computer graphics animators. But there was an episode that was interesting. They brought a guy, I forget his name, but he used to be a 2D animator at Disney. And then as the technology started shifting to 3D, he decided, you know what, I'm going to pick this up and start learning it. Whereas most of his fellow 2D animators, they're like, I'm too old. I don't want to, it's going to take a lot of energy to learn that, this thing. I'm near the end of my career. It's not a priority for me. Whereas this guy was a little bit younger. And so he decided he was going to pick it up. Then he ended up working on Kung Fu Panda. And he's telling the story about how, if you've seen Kung Fu Panda, there's the scene where he's running up the roof and it's kicking all these tiles into Tai Lung's face. And Tai Lung's face is just, bouncing all over the place with each one. And he really quickly animated that scene. And one of the younger animators looked at it and was like, whoa, how'd you do that? He's like, oh, I just put in a jitter. And he's like, what's a jitter? And he's like, it's just a basic animation technique. And he explains how a jitter is where what you do is you draw, like if you're showing someone like pulling at something and like having to hold it at tension and their hands, shake, what you do is you draw the hands just smoothly moving from side to side, but then you just intersperse the frames randomly. And but the issue was, these are 3D animators. They were trained to 3D animate, and he suddenly realized, oh crap, like these are the animation techniques that, we have developed from the time Walt put Mickey Mouse on a piece of paper to now. And because the 2D animators didn't move over to 3D, and because the 3D animators had never bothered to learn 2D, because why would you? You're learning 3D animation. There's a lot of the lessons that didn't make it across the gap. And he realized he needed to start doing that. And you think about gaming and how many jumps it's made in just the 40 years it's kind of become a thing. And there's all sorts of knowledge that's probably having issues jumping from from generation to generation, because it's evolved so quickly.
Lost.
Well, it's just the problem of you then have to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, it's lost, and we don't even realize it's lost.
Yeah, the unknown unknowns.
I mean, just me, messing around with tutorials in Godot, I've noticed that everything teaches you, oh, here's how you set up like some small one scene game, but they never really talk about how to do data packing and storing, for save files, and like just how, if you want to compact your information, or how do you want to minimize duplicate information, and kind of how to organize all this stuff. It's like they don't talk about it at all, because they're relying on some of these tools to do this. And depending on the scope of your, what you're creating, it's like, you'd either have to find other people talk about it or really think about it in a ways that, they don't really teach. And yet that'd be something that they'd focus heavily on if you were, learning programming from scratch back in the day when it's all, no engines. And, what data structure are you going to pack all this? How are you going to store all this? And what ways, and what's important, what needs to be saved, what's, how you're going to organize it. And, yeah, I can see that happening pretty, just from doing it on the side as an amateur thing. That I'm positive there's a lot of that.
Well, and like watching this, like what could be useful to a programmer here, seeing the problems they ran into with the collaboration process, where they're talking about, hey, everyone's sort of making a door slightly different sizes. And so one of them makes a map that standardizes it and says, our doors will be this height and width. If you're looking at a screen, the screen is this, this many pixels wide, this many pixels in. It's something that you can't teach someone in college how to collaborate on a project like that. You can try and make collaborative processes, but that's not going to prepare you to work for with 50 other people on a game. You were going to say something, Baggins?
No, I was just agreeing.
Oh, gotcha. And so things like this really show it's like, okay, these are the things you're sort of looking for. And it's important to document it, because otherwise, how are you going to find out other than, experience? And while experience is great and there's no better teacher, I'd at least like the option of seeing stuff otherwise, Give us a chance to learn from someone else's experience before we have to pee on the electric fence for ourselves.
Intelligence is learning from your mistakes. Wisdom is learning from someone else's mistakes.
Yes, exactly.
Charisma is convincing somebody else to do the mistake for you.
Spoken like a true rogue.
Constitution is just taking the mistake on the chin.
Yeah, pretty much. And dexterity is dodging the mistake, and strength is forcing your way through the mistake.
Yeah.
And we've just made our own D&D meme. Screw the salsa.
Mm-hmm.
The what?
There's a D&D meme about where they compare all 6 of the traits to a tomato, and it's what is it? It's like strength is crushing the tomato, Dex is throwing the tomato, Constitution is taking a thrown tomato, wisdom is knowing what is it? Like I forget it.
Intelligence is knowing that a tomato is a fruit, and wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad.
Yeah. Intelligence is knowing it's...
No, there was something else, because the charisma, because the joke to the charisma is that they say something for charisma, and then somebody, because this was like a Tumblr thread, somebody says, well, actually, if you consider it like that, then ketchup is, then a salsa is just a fruit salad, and then like the next one under is like, guys, we found the bard.
I remember seeing that somewhere.
I will find it and I will post it privately, because I'm sure we're getting to the point where we are about to start wrapping.
We are. The thing that's just, I like I said, I love that they're making this. I'd love to see more companies dive into this, and I would love to see more. I'm glad to see that this is becoming a trend as well on YouTube. You have these video game documentarians like No Clip doing stuff like that, and just these big projects of diving deep into these subjects and finding the wisdom, because it's like the whole, if I see far, it's because I stand on the shoulders of giants. It's important that we start interviewing these giants, because unlike a lot of other fields, video games are still young. And so we can talk to these guys before, they move on to the next phase of their life. We can get them while they're still sort of in the game, which is a rare opportunity. Because what's the phrase? It's like, you never know when you're in a golden age, but you definitely know when you've left one.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, we are in a golden age right now where the people who started the video game craze in the 80s are now, they're old men now.
And
we're starting to lose some of them.
Yeah, and you know, it's funny you say when you're leaving one, and if I'm perfectly honest, it does kind of feel like we're leaving one because I just feel like the games that come out don't have the magic that they had before.
See, I'm of the opinion we've left one and we're starting to enter into the Silver Age, but that's just me.
I think we're in the process of leaving right now, just with the state of the gaming industry, and just in the last 2 years, how many jobs lost. Like, there's people who are not going to want to get into this industry, and right now, I think we're about to have some rough riding when it comes to like real quality game.
I'm in the same boat as Splice, where I feel like we have left one, but the leaving of it has created a vacuum that shortly will start to be filled.
Yeah, actually, I view the job loss as a possible, it creates the opportunity for a renaissance. I actually think that when you get to a bad spot in an industry, job loss is actually a good sign. I mean, it's unfortunate for the people who do it, but businesses have to die in order for renaissances to happen. That's just the way it is.
Well, and there's also, we got to acknowledge this is also a very weird time, because I think in many ways the growing pains we're going through right now, we should have gone through 4 years ago, but with what happened with COVID, it caused a sudden jolt to the system that caused a lot of especially the AAA studios to way overhire, because they suddenly had, there's like, oh my goodness, look at all these people playing games. We gotta get more developers in here, not being wise and realizing this is a temporary thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that, and also the problem is when you overhire like that, you get people that are looking for a job and they don't really care what project they're working on, and the passion disappears when you do that. And that's why I think it is important to kind of, listen to these people that, had that passion of what they were creating and how they loved, it was a labor of love of what you're working on. And I feel like that's a big part of our current problem is it's a lot of people looking for a job. It's kind of like, I'm an engineer. I don't have a great love of what I'm doing, but I'm making something that's a bit more technical and less of artistic. So you can get away with it in technical things that something artistic like a video game, the customers can see that lack of passion and that deadness. And, I think that's a big part of it. And yeah, I think the overhiring was a big part of it. And you just see so many people working on projects that they hate. And for something creative, that's never a good recipe for a good product. So, yeah, I mean, and it's like I talked to, I was listening to an interview with an indie developer that spun off to make his own studio, and he talked about, oh, so you worked for these big companies, and oh yeah, and what were you doing? It's like, oh, I was working on making ports of these sports games. Like, oh, how was that? Soul crushing. I mean, that's the first word he says is soul crushing. So it's like, yeah, the passion's not there if you're not able to really choose what you're working on, and it's just you're assigned in this big company, this big development company. Oh, we're hiring you to work on this, and that's what you're doing.
Well, and to tie it all together, that's one of the biggest frustrations with Valve, is also one of its biggest strengths, is the fact that they don't work on a game unless the team wants to work on it.
Yeah.
And so,
and that makes a difference.
Yeah, makes it's why there's Valve quality at the same time. It's why
it's kind of part of the fall of Blizzard, in my opinion, because that was the attitude at one point, and then that shifted as they brought in new executives and just a lot of other reasons, and it became a different studio.
Yeah. Well, and you have different people coming in. They have their own ideas. You have people retiring, taking their ideas with them. And so it's going to change, but I'm with all this stuff coming out, I'm confident that there's sort of a it's been 20 years. It's the 20-year rule. people are looking back on it now, and they're sort of figuring out this is what the style of game was back then, and it's like, oh, is it time to revisit it? And I think it is. So, Valve, confirm Half-Life 3. Do it.
Yeah, well, keep doing you, bud. I think it'll be okay.
What if Half-Life 3 is almost done right now and they just drop it? It's like they shadow drop Half-Life 3.
It's a place you're gonna.
Well, they see this stream. They come in and they say it in chat. Drop it right there. Boom.
They drop it in some random Twitch streamer with 10
Half-Life 3
followers.
has already come out and we're just not aware of it yet.
Yeah.
They're so forward thinking. They've already dropped it.
That'd be very Valve.
Yes.
All right. Well, this has been a fun conversation. Let us get out of here though. It's late. Baggins, do you want to promote anything?
The Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies. If you're a fan of Brandon Sanderson at all, now is a great time to be a Brandon Sanderson fan, because we're getting ready to have Wind and Truth, the 5th book and final book in the first arc of the Stormlight archive. There'll be 5 more starting in several years' time, but so that's coming out, and then the Dragonsteel Nexus convention's coming soon. Now is a great time to be into Brandon Sanderson. So the Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies is another podcast that I work on with Splice. You also definitely check it out. Right now we've got a lot of spoilery stuff, but we've got a huge backlog of stuff that you can definitely go check out. So,
all right, Kamizite. Oh, sorry, I thought you were done.
Hey,
my apologies.
I was going to say that's at youtube.com/Cosmere Studies.
All right, now Kamizite.
Hey everyone, it's me, mostly fireproof, organically grown, your Olympic hero in mine, Dashing Kami Z. And as I always do, I am promoting my fantastic partner, Karina J, and her story, Entangled Enemies. As always, I am dropping on all of my socials right this very moment, and in the self-promotion portion of the Splice stream, a link to where you can vote for her. And really, Tapas has kind of done her dirty. So, like, anyone who can hear my voice, anyone, just get your friends, have them go, make a Tapas account. It's free. Go to the link that I have provided here, and then you can go and you have 3 votes, and you can vote for her 3 times. They've kind of done this thing, and it's really kind of crappy. They had the top 50, which she made, thanks to everyone here, and really, thank you guys. But, like, they split it up when the second leg of the contest and the voting started into 2 groups of 25. And the first group, they set out to all the Tapas users and all of their emails. And she was in the second group, and they still, 2 weeks into it, haven't promoted her. And plus, anyone who saw it in the first time, who was in the first group, saw growth in numbers and probably had all of the votes have been cast for those particular people. So if we can just get people to just rally behind her, that would be awesome. But other than that, if you act now, we will make Splice eat, I don't know, a smoked Brussels sprout for every vote that she gets. Sounds good.
Every vote, that's a lot of sprouts.
Yep, smoked sprouts, specifically.
He does not speak for me, and this is not real. Lunasar.
God bless me, and God bless Comerica.
I'll promote Lizzie. Lizzie's stream. That's Lizzie Petrichor on Twitch, and she does Pokemon shiny hunting and with nice chill vibes. And I actually saw her today on Tapas reading the new update of the story Entangled Enemies. So yeah, she's really been enjoying that. Yeah.
Excellent.
Right. And yeah, you can find me twitch.tv/Splice stream, playing games, doing stuff. It's fun. I don't really have anything more than that.
Well, it's been 20 years, and I definitely think we overleveled.
3 confirmed.